Rain had been falling on Thornfield Cross since before light. The kind of thin autumn rain that did not so much fall as hang. And the market square smelled of wet wool and coal smoke, and the sour tang of turned cabbage leaves someone had not swept away. Edith Marsh crossed it with her basket on her arm, and her father's old gloves on her hands, the leather gone soft and dark with years of other people's mending. She was the kind of woman a street forgot the moment she turned the corner. Not pretty, not plain enough to pity, just a woman with red knuckles and a straight back, walking fast because she had somewhere to be, and no coin to spare for standing still. She had one skill in the world that anyone valued, and it was not sewing, though she sewed well enough to keep a roof over her head. She had a way with frightened animals. She could stand at the head of a bolting cart horse and have it still inside a minute, and nobody, not even Edith, could have told you exactly how. Her father had taught her. Her father was 3 years dead, and the town remembered him only as the groom who had been sent off from Belhaven Chase under a cloud, though nobody living could say any more what the cloud had actually been. Something was going to happen at that crossroads before the church bell rang for noon. She did not know it yet. She only felt, the way she felt weather coming, that the day had a shape to it already, and that shape was waiting just past the fishmonger's stall. If a story like this one has done its work so far, you already feel that shape too, and there will be more of it in a moment. While you wait for it, take half a breath and subscribe to the channel, so the next one finds you as easily as this one did. The shape turned out to be a boy. He could not have been more than 9, all elbows and no coat, and he was on the ground under a farmer's boot when Edith rounded the fish stall. The farmer had him by the collar with one hand and was cuffing him with the other, shouting about a stolen turnip as if the boy had made off with the crown jewels. A small crowd had gathered the way crowds gather for anything that is not their own trouble. Nobody moved. Edith moved. She did not think about it. She did not weigh the cost of it, though the cost was real. 4 pence she did not have to spare, the last coin between her rent and the street. She put the coin in the farmer's hand and said the boy had been sent by her, that it was her turnip to give, that he'd made an honest mistake in her name. It was not true. She said it plain and flat, the way she said everything, and something in her flatness made the farmer believe her more than tears would have. The farmer let the boy go. The crowd lost interest inside a minute, the way crowds do. Edith crouched down in the mud of the square and looked at the boy's split lip and did not touch it until she had asked if she might. "What's your name?" she said. "Simon," he said. He did not look at her. "I weren't stealing it to keep. I was stealing it to eat." "I know," she said. "It comes to the same thing, to a hungry man's stomach. It does not come to the same thing in law. You'll want to remember that." She did not know that a man was watching her from the mouth of the Smith's alley, a tall man in a plain brown coat with a lead rope looped over one shoulder, and a young gelding standing patient behind him, waiting to be shod. He had come into Thornfield Cross that morning under a name that was not his, to have a horse's shoe seen to, and to watch, quietly, the way people in his own house behaved when they believed no one who mattered was looking. He had not expected to learn anything in a fish market. He learned something anyway. He watched the woman kneel in the wet street beside a boy who could do nothing for her, not now, not ever, and give away money she plainly did not have, and refuse the thanks of the small crowd that had begun, now that the danger was past, to murmur its approval. She waved the thanks off with one gloved hand, the way a person waves off smoke. "I'd have done it for anyone," she told a woman who tried to press a shilling on her for her trouble. "Keep your coin. I want none of it." She did not know his face. She would not have known his name if he had given it, because he did not give it, not that day. She took the boy by the hand instead, and led him off toward the lane where she rented her one room above the chandler's, already turning over in her mind what she had left in the cupboard that a growing boy might eat, and she did not once look back at the alley by the Smiths, where the man in the plain brown coat stood very still, watching her go, turning something over of his own. She did not know then that the shoe he had come to have fitted was for a mare no stranger's hand had touched gently in 6 years. She did not know that within the week that Mare's name and her own would be spoken in the same breath in a house she had never entered. She only knew that she had a boy to feed, and 4 pence less than she had woken with, and that this to her seemed a fair trade. Simon ate everything she put in front of him, and thanked her for none of it, because he did not yet know how, and she did not ask him to learn. She let him sleep that night, by her small fire, on a folded blanket, and in the morning she did not send him back to the street, though she had no earthly notion what she would do with a boy she could not afford to keep. What she did was walk to the Belhaven Chase stable gate 2 mornings later, and ask for Mr. Pratt, the head groom, a man she had known slightly through her father, years before. She did not tell Pratt the whole of it. She told him only that she knew a boy strong enough and quiet enough to sweep a yard, a boy who would work for his bread and ask for little else, and that if Pratt had a place for him she would be grateful, though she was not a woman who asked favours easily, and it cost her something to stand in that yard and ask this one. Pratt looked her over the way men like Pratt looked over everything, weighing its use. "Marsh's girl," he said. "Not a question. Heard your father passed. 3 years gone," she said. "Pity, that business," Pratt said, and did not finish the thought, because it was not his business to finish it, and they both knew it, and she did not press him, though something in her went very still and quiet for a moment, the way water goes still before it freezes. He took the boy on trial. He did not ask why a woman with nothing to spare would give up her only lodger's help, sweeping her own hearth, to see a stranger's child fed at someone else's expense. Edith did not explain it either, because to her it did not require explaining. It was simply the thing in front of her, and she had done it, the way she had done the thing in front of her at the fish market, and she expected no more credit for one than the other, which was to say, none at all. She did not know that the man who had watched her in the market had by then spoken 2 quiet words to Pratt himself, under the name Jory Fenn, a new hand hired on trial that same week to help with the horses, a man nobody at Belhaven Chase yet knew was the master of it. He had told Pratt only that the boy from the market ought to be given a fair look, if a place could be found. He had not said why. Pratt, who took orders from whoever seemed to know his business and did not ask more than he needed to, had found the place, and so it was that, within a fortnight, Simon slept in the loft above the Belhaven stables, with a full stomach and a broom taller than he was, and Edith Marsh, who had lost her only helper and gained nothing visible for it, found herself 3 days after that offered mending work up at the great house itself, sheets and linens and torn tack leather, steady coin. More than she had seen steady in a year. She did not ask who had recommended her. She assumed it was Pratt, remembering her father kindly. She was half right, and did not know the other half, and for a long while she was not meant to. The stable yard at Belhaven Chase in late autumn smelled of hay and leather and the sharp, clean smell of horse, and Edith came to know it the way she came to know most places, quietly from the edges, doing her work and speaking only when spoken to. She sat in the tack room most mornings with a needle and a pile of torn harness, and it was there that she first had a real conversation with the new hand called Jory Fenn. He was not like the other men. He worked hard, harder than a man needed to work who was only trying to keep a place, and he was quiet in a way that was not shyness. He watched things. He watched horses the way she did, waiting instead of forcing, and the first time she saw him gentle a green colt without raising his voice or his hand. Something in her, some old instinct trained by her father, recognised a kindred patience. "You've done this before," she said. Not a question either, though it came out sounding a little like one. He did not answer at once. He finished settling the colt's headstall, checked the buckle twice, though it did not need checking twice, and only then looked at her. "A little," he said. "More than a little," she said. "You don't hold a lead rope like a man who's done it a little. You're sharp," he said. "I've spent my life around men who lie about horses," she said. "You learn to tell." He almost smiled. It was a small thing, gone before it had properly arrived, but she noticed it, the way she noticed most small true things, and said nothing about most of them. They fell, over the coming days, into an easy habit of speaking plainly to each other in the tack room and the yard, about horses mostly, sometimes about the weather, once or twice about nothing at all, comfortable silences that neither of them hurried to fill. He asked about her father once, careful, sideways. The way a man asks about a wound he suspects is still raw. "You believe he was innocent," Jory said. "I know he was innocent," she said. "A man does not teach his daughter to be honest with her whole chest if he is not honest himself. He taught me that lying costs more than it buys, even when it buys quite a lot. I have never once caught him lying to me, not on his deathbed, not anywhere. I choose to believe that means something." He was quiet a long moment at that, turning a buckle over and over in his fingers that did not need turning, and something moved behind his dark eyes that she could not read and did not try to. She did not know that the man in front of her was, at that very hour, quietly having his own steward's old ledgers pulled from a locked cupboard in the house above them, searching for a name he had not thought of in a decade. She did not know that a debt he had never known existed was about to come due, or that he was the one who would have to pay it. She only knew that Jory Fenn listened to her the way very few people ever had, as if what she said mattered on its own account, and that this, more than any kindness he might have shown her without her knowledge, was the thing that had begun, quietly, to matter to her in return. He left a pair of boots outside the tack-room door for Simon that week. Warm ones. Well made, far too fine for a stable sweep's wages to explain. No note came with them. When Edith asked Pratt about it, Pratt only shrugged and said perhaps the last groom had left them behind, though everyone in that yard knew the last groom's feet had been half again the size of Simon's, and nobody said so aloud, because it did not seem the sort of gift a person ought to embarrass by naming it. Winter came down hard on Belhaven Chase that year, and with it came Lady Prudence Vane, back from her long visit to relations in the north, installed once more in the good rooms of the house as she had been since girlhood, when the old Duchess had taken her in out of family duty after her father's death left her with a good name and very little money. She had grown up believing that duty owed to her was the same as love, and that the house and its master owed her both, and nothing in the years since had persuaded her otherwise. She found Edith in the stable yard on a grey morning in the first week of frost, kneeling by Simon to fix a strap on his coat. And she stopped, the way a person stops to examine something on the sole of a boot. "You're the mending girl," Prudence said. Her voice was pleasant. Her voice was always pleasant. It was the pleasantness of a very sharp blade being drawn slowly from its sheath. "I remember the business with your father. Everyone thought it very sad, of course. Some men simply cannot resist what does not belong to them. I suppose it runs in families, the wanting of things one has no right to." Edith did not stand. She finished the strap first, because Simon was cold and the strap mattered more than the words did. Only then did she rise and face Prudence directly, her chin level, her hands still. "My father did not steal," she said. "I would thank you not to say so in front of the boy, or in front of me, since neither of us has done you the courtesy of a lie, and I do not see why you should be granted one at our expense." A small silence fell over the yard. 2 grooms found urgent business with a wheelbarrow. "How very plain you are," Prudence said, and laughed. 3 light practised notes, like a bell rung by a hand that knew exactly how much sound it wanted and no more. It must be restful, having nothing anyone could envy. One never has to guard it. "No," Edith agreed. "One does not." She did not raise her voice. She did not look away. She did not, though her hands had gone very still at her sides, cry. Not there, not where it would show, because she had taught herself years before that tears in front of people like Lady Prudence Vane were simply another thing they could take from you, and she had already given this house enough. Jory Fenn had come to the yard door with a bridle over his arm part-way through the exchange, and he did not move to speak, because it was not, in his borrowed place, his to speak into. But Edith saw, from the edge of her eye, that he had gone very still too, the stillness of a man holding something in check, and that when Lady Prudence turned to sweep back toward the house, she passed close by him, and did not so much as glance his way, because to her he was only a stable hand. And stable hands were furniture. That evening Mrs. Yarrow, the housekeeper, found Edith in the servants' passage, and pressed a cup of something hot into her hands, without asking if she wanted it, which was Mrs. Yarrow's particular way of asking after a person's heart. "Pay her no mind, Mrs." Yarrow said. "She has been unhappy a long time, and unhappy people spend their unhappiness on whoever stands nearest, the way a man spends whatever coin is in his pocket, not whatever coin he ought." "I don't mind for myself," Edith said. "I mind for my father's name." "I know, Mrs." Yarrow said. And something crossed her broad, kind face that Edith did not understand at the time, something that looked almost like guilt, though it was gone as quickly as it had come. "Drink your tea, child. It'll be a long winter. Best not to face it cold." The cold came harder before it came softer. A fever went through the stable loft in the second week of frost, and Simon caught it worst of anyone, burning and shaking on his pallet, while Edith sat up 3 nights running with cloths and water. She could not always spare the coal to warm. On the 4th morning a doctor came, unbidden, unannounced, a good one from the county town, and treated the boy for a full week, and would not take a farthing for it, saying only that his account had already been settled by a party who wished not to be named. Edith asked Pratt. Pratt did not know, or said he did not. She asked Mrs. Yarrow, who only patted her hand and said some doors were better left unopened until the house itself decided to open them. She did not ask Jory Fenn, because it did not once occur to her that a stable hand's wages could have paid for a county doctor's week. And so the one door that might have told her the truth stood closest to her the entire time, and she walked past it a dozen times a day without knocking. Simon recovered slowly, and when he was strong enough to be back on his feet, thin and pale but steady, he took again to following Edith about the yard on her mending errands, and it was in those weeks that she taught him, without any great ceremony, the thing her father had taught her. When a horse is frightened, she told him, kneeling with him by the fence of the home paddock, you do not chase what is afraid, you wait, you let it decide to come to you, because a thing that decides for itself trusts you in a way a thing you dragged never will. She showed him then, slow, so he could copy it, the flat of her hand held low and open beneath the eyeline, drawn in a slow half-circle through the air, then stilled, resting soft against her own cheek. This is the whole of it. My father showed me. You hold it here, low, where nothing sudden can come from it, and you make the same shape every time, so the animal learns the shape means safety before it learns to trust your face. Where'd your father learn it? Simon asked. I never asked, Edith said. I wish now that I had. There is a great deal I never thought to ask him, believing there would always be time to ask it later. There is a lesson in that too, if you care to take it. She did not know, saying this, that the shape she was teaching a 9-year-old boy to keep his hands from being bitten had a name in the house above them that was never spoken outside the family that owned it, that it had been taught by a duchess 2 generations gone to exactly one groom she trusted with her most difficult horse, and that the groom's name had been Thomas Marsh. The mare called Juno had not let a stranger touch her gently in 6 years, not since the morning the old duke's wife had gone out on her in a hard frost and come back on a hurdle instead of in the saddle, thrown when the mare shied at nothing anyone could later name. Julian had been 24 that morning, home from the war on leave, and it had been his hand, not any groom's, that had caught the mare's bridle in the yard afterward, and his voice that had gone hoarse, trying to make her stand still, while the household carried his mother inside. He had not been able to save her. He had, in the years since, kept the mare anyway, out of a grief he could not properly name even to himself, and forbidden anyone from selling her or putting her down, though she had grown dangerous with age and disuse, and Pratt privately thought his master a sentimental fool for it, and never once said so. He had come to Thornfield Cross that autumn morning under a stable hand's name for 2 reasons, and only one of them was the shoe on the gelding. The other was that Juno had savaged a groom's arm badly enough to end the man's career 3 weeks before, and Julian had begun to suspect that someone in his own stables was mishandling her, out of laziness or cruelty or simple fear, and that no one would tell him the truth of it while he wore his own name. He had come down to his own yard the way a man comes down to his own house at night to learn what the servants say of him when the candles are out, and what he had found before he ever crossed the stable gate was a woman kneeling in a market square giving away her last coin to a stranger's child. He had not planned to keep the disguise past a fortnight. He kept it through the winter instead, telling himself it was for the mare's sake, and knowing, in the honest hours before sleep, that it had stopped being for the mare's sake within the first week. The day Edith Marsh told him plainly across a pile of torn harness that she could always tell when a man lied about horses. He watched her teach the boy the hand shape in the paddock from the loft window above, and something in his chest went very cold and very still, the way still water goes before ice takes it whole. He did not go down. He did not say a word. He only watched, and then he went to the locked cupboard in the estate office that evening, and pulled out ledgers no one had opened in a decade. Searching by candlelight for one name among 100 until he found it, entered 11 years back in his late uncle's careful hand, the dismissal of one Thomas Marsh, under hostler, for the theft of a quantity of silver harness fittings, character not to be given. Beneath the entry, in a different ink, added later and never explained, his uncle had written a single line and then, it seemed, thought better of finishing it. The line read only, "The boy did not do it," and I have known so since. Julian sat a long time with that ledger open on his knee, the candle burning low, and did not move, and for the first time since he had put on a stable-hand's coat, he understood that the thing he had come to his own yard to find was not a cruelty being done to a horse. It was a debt 11 years old, owed to a dead man, that only he now had the power to pay, and a woman 2 doors away who did not yet know that the stranger she trusted with her plain talk about horses was the one man in England who could clear her father's name, and had, until an hour ago, no idea that it needed clearing by his hand at all. The mare bolted on a bright, hard morning in the first week of the new year, when a loose gate latch, worked at too long by weather, and never mended, because no one had thought Juno dangerous enough near the outer paddock to matter, gave way all at once in a gust of wind, and the mare went through it into the yard proper, at a dead run, wild-eyed. Ears flat, with 2 grooms scattering, and a cart-horse rearing in its traces, and Simon, who had been carrying a basket of feed across the open yard, at exactly the wrong moment, standing directly in her path with nowhere to run, and no time left to try. Edith was 30 yards off with a needle still in her hand, and she did not think. She moved, the way she had not thought, and only moved in a fish market months before, and it would not have mattered. Because 30 yards is a long way, and a bolting horse is fast, and she knew even as she ran that she would not reach him in time. She did not reach him in time. Simon did not run, though every animal instinct in a 9-year-old boy screamed to run. He stood, small and thin in his too big coat, and he lifted his hand the way she had taught him, low, open, drawn slow through the air in a half-circle, and he stilled it against his own cheek, and he did not breathe. Juno's ears came up. Her stride broke, faltered, gathered itself into something smaller and slower, and then, 6 feet from the boy, with dust still rising around her hooves, she stopped. She stood trembling, sides heaving, and lowered her great head, and Simon, without seeming to decide to do it, reached up and laid his small palm flat against her nose, and the mare that had not let a stranger's gentle hand near her in 6 years stood shaking and still and let him. Nobody in that yard moved for a long moment. Then everyone moved at once, grooms shouting, Pratt bellowing for a lead rope, Edith arriving at a dead run to gather Simon into her arms so hard he gasped, and in the middle of it, framed in the stable door in his plain brown coat, Jory Fenn stood utterly motionless, staring at the boy's raised hand, as if he had seen a ghost walk across his own yard in broad daylight. Because in a sense he had. It was Lady Prudence, drawn out onto the terrace steps by the commotion, who put words to what half the yard was already thinking, and none of them dared say. She came down into the yard slow, in her fine boots, and looked at Simon still pressed against Edith's side, and her pleasant voice, when it came, had an edge in it Edith had not heard before, something closer to fear than to contempt, though it wore contempt's clothes. "That is not a common thing," Prudence said. "That gesture. I have seen it exactly once before in my life, and it was not taught to grooms or beggar boys. Where did the child learn it? I taught him, Edith said. My father taught it to me. I don't know where he learnt it. I never thought to ask. How convenient, Prudence said, that a dead man cannot be asked to confirm it. I wonder whether the theft your father was dismissed for included rather more than silver. I wonder whether a groom clever enough to make off with the family's own secrets might not have made off with a good many things nobody ever traced to him. It would explain rather a lot, would it not? How his daughter comes to know things she has no earthly right to know. The words landed in the cold yard, like stones dropped into still water, and Edith felt them go through her exactly where they were aimed, at her father's grave, at the one thing she had never let anyone take from her, even when they had taken everything else. She did not cry. She had trained herself for 11 years not to cry where it showed, but her hands, gripping Simon's shoulders, had begun very faintly to shake, and she could not make them stop, and that frightened her more than Prudence's words had, because her hands had never shaken in front of anyone before, not once, not even at her father's grave. She looked for Jory in the crowd of faces, and found him watching her, still and pale, and something passed between them that she could not name, some plea in his eyes that looked almost like grief, and she did not understand it, and had no strength left that morning to try. She took Simon and went back to their room above the chandler's that evening, and did not come to the yard the next morning, or the one after. She sat by her small fire with her father's mending basket unopened on her knee, and thought, plainly and without self-pity, that she had asked for nothing from that house, had wanted nothing from it, and had ended by having her father's grave dug open in front of strangers for the sport of a woman who had never once gone hungry in her life. She wrote a short letter to Pratt, thanking him for the place he had given Simon, and asking that the boy be allowed to keep it, and saying that she herself would not be returning to her mending work at the great house. She did not explain further. She did not feel she owed further explanation to a house that had let her father's name be dragged through its own yard, without one person in authority stepping forward to stop it. She did not know that the one person in that house with the authority to stop it, and the knowledge to end it for good, had spent that same night with an old ledger open on his desk, and a decision forming in him that he could delay no longer, whatever it cost him. Yarrow came to Edith's door on the third evening, out of breath from the climb, her shawl damp with rain, and would not be turned away. "You'll hear me out," she said, settling herself uninvited into the room's one good chair, "before you decide the whole world is against you. Because it is not, and I have let this go on a fortnight longer than I ought out of respect for a man's wishes that I am about to disregard entirely. I don't wish to hear more about that house," Edith said. "You'll hear this part, Mrs., Yarrow said, because it is not about the house, it is about your father." She folded her hands. "I was a housemaid there when Thomas Marsh was let go. I was young. I had no say in anything, and I have carried it a long while, the not saying of what I knew, which was that the old steward, Mr. Edmund Vane, Lady Prudence's own father, had debts nobody upstairs knew of, and that the silver that went missing went the same road his debts did, and that your father took the blame, because it was easiest to give the blame to a man too poor and too proud to fight it in a court that would never have believed him over a gentleman." Edith sat very still. "You knew this all these years?" "I suspected it, Mrs., Yarrow said. "I have known it for certain only since a young stable hand started asking me quiet questions about old ledgers a few weeks back, and told me plain what he'd found written in his own uncle's hand." She watched Edith's face carefully. "You have not asked me his name yet." I noticed that. I know his name, Edith said slowly. Jory Fenn. That is the name he gave Pratt, Mrs. Yarrow said, on the day he hired himself into his own stables to learn what his own people would not tell him to his face. His true name is Julian Vane. He is the Duke of Renwick, and master of every stone of that house you have just given up your place in, and he has known who your father was, and very likely who you were. Since the morning you gave your last coin away in a fish market, and did not know he was standing in the alley behind you. The room was very quiet. Somewhere below, the chandler's shop bell rang once as a customer left, ordinary and small, and it seemed to Edith a strange thing that the world could go on ringing its ordinary bells while the floor of her own understanding tilted so completely beneath her. He lied to me, she said finally. For weeks, every day, in that tack room, he let me talk to him about my father as though he were a stranger to the whole business, when he was the one man alive with the power to end it. He was testing whether you were worth ending it for, Mrs., Yarrow said gently, before he risked his uncle's name and his own household's peace to do it. I do not say that to excuse him. I say it because it is the truth, and you are a woman who has never once, in my hearing, preferred a comfortable lie to an uncomfortable truth, and I did not think you would want me to start giving you one now. Edith did not answer that. She sat with her hands very still in her lap, and Mrs. Yarrow, who had said what she had come to say, rose after a while and let herself out into the rain, leaving Edith alone with a fire burning low and a great deal to think through before morning. He came the next evening, in his own name for the first time in her hearing, and he came alone, without a groom or a carriage announced, and he stood in the small doorway of her room, with the rain still on his shoulders, and did not step over the threshold until she told him he might. I owe you a great deal of honesty, he said, and I have brought as much of it as I could carry in one visit. She did not offer him the chair. She stood by the cold hearth with her arms folded, and she let him speak, because she had decided, sometime in the small hours, that whatever else was true, she would hear the whole of it plainly before she judged any part of it. I came to my own stables under another man's name, because I believed someone in my house was cruel to the people who could not answer back, he said. I did not expect to find you there. I saw you give away money you could not spare to a boy who could never repay you, in a street where you believed no one of any consequence was watching. I have spent a great deal of my life watching people behave one way when they think themselves seen, and another way entirely when they do not. I wanted to know what you were, truly, before rank or title or anything I could offer you had the chance to teach you to perform for me instead. That is the whole of why I kept the name. It began as caution. It became, before very long, something else, and I let it go on longer than caution required, because I was a coward about ending it. You let my father's name be dragged into a stable yard, she said, and said nothing, when a word from you would have ended it in a breath. I said nothing that morning, because I did not yet have proof enough to end it as it deserved to be ended, he said. A word from a duke is not proof to a world that wants proof against a duke's own family, and I would not clear one dead man's name by hanging a slander on it that could not be made to stand. I have spent every hour since finding a way to make it stand. He drew a folded paper from inside his coat, worn soft at the creases from having been carried and read too many times. My uncle wrote, before he died, that your father did not do it, and that he had known so since. I have a second statement now, taken this week from the one man still living who helped move the silver, a man my uncle paid to keep silent, and who has kept silent, out of shame, for 11 years, until I gave him reason enough to stop. I intend to have your father's name cleared publicly, in this town, before the same magistrate who took the original charge, whatever it costs my family's name to do it. I would have done that whether you ever spoke to me again or not. I want you to know that before anything else I say tonight." She did not answer at once. The fire popped once, low, and a long silence sat in the small room, and he did not fill it, though it plainly cost him something not to. "You watched me," she said finally, "for weeks, knowing all of that. And you let me believe you a stranger." "Yes," he said. "That was not honest of you." "No," he said, "it was not. I have no defence for it that would satisfy me if I heard it from another man's mouth, and I will not insult you by offering one." She looked at him a long moment. This man who did not flinch from being told plainly that he had wronged her, who had come without a carriage and without an escort, and without, it seemed, any intention of asking her to make this easy for him. "I would like you to go," she said at last, quietly, "not forever. I have not decided forever. I would like you to go tonight, and let me think, without your coat dripping on my floor, and your face doing that thing it is doing, which makes it difficult for me to think clearly at all." Something in his expression, at that, came very close to a smile, grave and unpractised, and gone almost before it arrived. "I will go," he said. "I will not come again until you send for me. I would rather have your honest silence than press you into a false yes for the sake of my own comfort." He paused at the door. "For what it is worth, Miss Marsh, I did not come to that fish market looking for anything at all. I only found, once I was there, that I could not stop looking afterward." He left her the folded paper on the table before he went, and did not ask for it back, and Edith sat alone a long while after the door had closed, listening to the rain, holding a document that named her father an honest man in ink that could not be argued with, feeling something in her chest that was not quite forgiveness yet, and not quite anger either, but some third thing, unsteady and slow, that she did not yet have a word for. 3 weeks passed, and in them a great deal happened at Belhaven Chase that Edith heard of only second-hand, carried to her by Mrs. Yarrow over cups of tea she no longer had to ask twice to accept. The Duke of Renwick called the county magistrate to the Chase himself, and laid before him, in front of witnesses, the statement of the man who had helped move his late uncle's stolen silver, and the ledger in his uncle's own hand admitting the truth of it, and asked that the name of Thomas Marsh, under Hostler, deceased, be formally and publicly cleared. It was done within the fortnight, posted at the church door, and read from the steps of the market cross at Thornfield, where Edith had once knelt in the mud over a hungry boy, and this time it was her father's name that was spoken there, cleared, in front of the whole town. Lady Prudence Vane did not stay to see it read. She left Belhaven Chase within the week for a cousin's house in Scarborough, her father's disgrace laid bare beside her own cruelty for anyone with eyes to weigh them together, and the Duke gave her, Mrs. Yarrow reported, with a certain dry satisfaction, exactly enough for the journey, and not 1 shilling more, and a letter she was said to have burned unread rather than face what it likely said. "He asked nothing of me in return," Edith said to Mrs. Yarrow one evening, turning the housekeeper's words over slowly. "That was rather the point of doing it that way, I should think, Mrs. Yarrow said, not unkindly. A man who clears a dead man's name to win a living woman's hand has done something rather smaller than a man who clears it because it was owed, and only afterward hopes, without daring to ask, that the woman might think better of him for it." Edith thought of the boots left with no note. She thought of the doctor who would not take payment. She thought of a man who had listened to her talk about her father across a pile of torn harness, as though her opinion of a dead groom's honesty were the most important fact in the county, and had all along held in his own hands the power to prove her right, and had waited, patient as a man waiting for a frightened horse to decide on its own to come to him. She sent word to Belhaven Chase on a clear, cold morning in early spring, 3 words only, carried by Simon, who ran the whole distance and arrived at the stable yard so out of breath he could barely deliver them. Julian was in the yard when the boy came skidding through the gate, and he read the 3 words on the scrap of paper Simon thrust at him, and something in his grave face broke open entirely, unguarded, for the first time anyone at Belhaven Chase had ever seen. "I am ready." He walked the whole way to Thornfield Cross himself, rather than wait for a carriage to be brought round, and found her standing outside the chandler's shop in the thin spring sunlight, her father's gloves on her hands as always. And he stopped a respectful distance off, because he had promised her time and he intended to keep every promise he had left to keep her. "You did not have to come yourself," she said. "I did," he said. "I have spent a great many weeks learning that the things worth having are the ones a man goes and gets with his own hands, and does not send a servant for." She held out one gloved hand toward him then, and he understood her meaning at once, and stepped close and drew the worn leather glove off her fingers one at a time, slow, deliberate, until her bare hand lay in his, red-knuckled and work-roughened, and entirely her own, and he bent his head and pressed his mouth to the back of it, once, gently, and did not let it go. "I love you," he said, for the woman who gave away her last coin in a market square, believing no one of any consequence would ever know it. "I loved you before I had the right to say so, and I have no wish to be loved back for a dukedom, or for a cleared name, or for anything I can give you that is not simply myself. If you will have me, I would rather have your yes freely given than any yes owed to gratitude, and if it is no, I will have cleared your father's name gladly all the same, and asked for nothing, and counted it worth doing. I have one condition," she said, "before I answer. Name it. That you are never again anything other than exactly what you say you are, to me, for as long as we both live. I do not ask for wealth, and I would not have known what to do with it if you had offered it first. I ask only to be spoken to, plainly, always, whatever the cost of the plainness. You have it," he said. "You have had it since the night I stood dripping on your floor, and told you the whole truth, rather than the comfortable half of it. I do not intend to go back to half-truths now, that I have learned how much lighter the whole ones sit." "Then yes," she said, "it is the only word I need to give you." He laced his bare fingers through hers there in the street, in front of the chandler's shop and the fish stall, and the whole ordinary morning of Thornfield Cross, and did not kiss her mouth, because that was not yet theirs to give away in a public street, but he held her hand as though he meant never to be the one to let it go first, and for a long moment neither of them said anything at all, because there was, for once, nothing left that needed saying. They were married in the small stone church at Thornfield Cross in early summer, a quiet wedding as such things go for a duke, though the whole town turned out to see it, and Simon stood near the front in a coat that fit him properly for the first time in his life, holding Mrs. Yarrow's hand and looking, everyone agreed, entirely too proud of himself for a boy who had done nothing that day but stand still and watch. A year later, on an evening in early autumn, with the first cold coming down off the hills the way it always did at Belhaven Chase, Edith sat by the fire in the small parlour off the stable yard, the one Julian had once used as a tack room, and now kept, by unspoken agreement, as the place they went when they wanted to be plainly themselves and nothing else. Juno grazed in the home paddock beyond the window, old now and gentled, no longer dangerous to anyone, and Simon, 11 and growing fast, was out there with her, sweeping the same yard he had once been hired to sweep, though he was being schooled 3 mornings a week now at the Duke's own quiet expense, and everyone in the county understood, without it ever needing to be said aloud, exactly whose boy he had become in every way that mattered. Julian came in from the cold and sat beside her, and took her bare hand in his without asking, the way he had taken to doing every evening since their wedding. And she let him, and neither of them let go for a long while. "I have been thinking," she said, "that I ought to teach the shape to Simon properly now, not just as a trick for a frightened horse, as what it is." "As a family sign," Julian said. "Yes," she said, "since he is family, whatever the parish register says or doesn't say about it." "Then teach him," Julian said. "It seems to me the sort of thing that ought never again belong to only one family's blood, when it has already saved one boy's life belonging to no family at all." On a shelf by the parlour door hung her father's gloves, mended past all reasonable use, kept now not for wearing, but for looking at, and beside them, newer, a smaller pair, cut down for a growing boy's hands, and beside those, a third pair that had not existed a year before, fine and plain both at once, waiting for whichever small hand might some day need them. A person's worth, in that house and in that town, had come to be measured, in the years after, exactly the way it had always secretly been measured by the people who mattered most in it, by what a person did for another creature who could give nothing back, in the one unwatched moment before the world ever thought to look. That is the whole of the lesson this story has to leave with you. Character is not the thing you perform for an audience. It is the thing you do in the one plain moment when you believe there is no audience at all. If this story found something true in you, the kindest thing you can do for it is stay close for the next one, and subscribing to the channel is the simplest way to make sure it reaches you. I would love to know, in the comments, which moment stayed with you longest, the boy's raised hand stilling the mare, or the gloves drawn off finger by finger at the end. Tell me plainly, the way Edith would have. Until the next quiet kindness finds its Duke, take care of yourselves and of whoever nobody else is watching out for tonight.